Okay, this is a quick introduction to the art of Renaissance and Baroque Europe. I will also talk a little bit about Rococo and some of the other styles that were the result of the Renaissance. Okay, so Renaissance, why does everyone always talking about the Renaissance? Why was it so important? The reason why it was so important because things started to change after the medieval times. So people started to read more, there was improved literacy, there was interest in education and science. People were discovering new lands, right? What happened between 1400 and 1600? People were discovering, America and Australia and all these different places, and just learning a little bit more about the world and the universe. So what happened is that led to people being interested a little bit more in being intellectual and also paying attention to the physical potential of human beings as opposed to focusing 100% on religion. Now, I want you to think, what does this time period kind of remind you of, right? It's very similar to the Greek time period where there was a place for religion, but there was also a place for secular, human intellect. Okay, so Renaissance means rebirth of, and they're hinting at the Greek times. Okay, in the religious sector, there was a lot of stuff going on with Christianity. There was a split where two different groups started to form, which were the Catholic, which were more in the southern Europe, and then there were the Protestants, which was more like the northern Europe. Okay, and that led to a lot of differences in art and a lot of art making too, because what was happening is that people were trying to figure out, okay, do I want to be Catholic or do I want to be Protestant, right? People, this was not something that was old. This was very, very new. So the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, they were both making like really great pieces of art in order to in order to attract people towards their church and keeping them from converting to the other church. Okay. Okay. There's early, high, and late Renaissance in Italy. So I want you to read a little bit about it. And this just refers to the Giotto painting that I had you guys look at in chapter 3.2. Okay. This is an example of early Renaissance. Okay. There was an increase in making things a little bit more realistic. So that's one of the keys. Uh, Artists were really interested in making things more realistic. They were looking at science, they were looking at how light falls on everything. They looked at perspective lines and how to make things more and more realistic. Okay, so pause here and kind of go back and forth and look at this image in your book as well. High Renaissance in Italy were signified by three main artists, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. These three names you have heard many times, of course, all over the media, and the Ninja Turtles, of course. Most important part, making art look believable. Okay, and Catholic Church was the most important patron of the arts because they had really strong ties with the monarchy, so they were quite rich and able to build amazing artwork and amazing churches. Okay, this is a very, very important work of art that I want you to read about in your book. A lot of different formal elements and principles of art are used in this image, and this is the time when these elements and principles of art really started to take a play, and artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo were kind of like creating these new ideas. What happens in the center, what focal point, and perspective lines, and a lot of other things as well. So I want you to make sure that you read about this in your book on page 468. Okay. Now, Northern Europe was a little bit different. They really focused on texture and fine detail, and they're the ones who developed oil paint. Okay, so if you remember back from when we looked at like media and processes, oil paint was really important because it allowed for the artist to work really slowly and make changes as they go because the paint took 2 weeks to dry. Okay. Okay, so they use a lot of symbols. So this is a religious piece of art, but something is missing, right? Where is Jesus Christ in this piece of art? So that was one of the big differences between Catholic art and Protestant art. Protestant art didn't necessarily have Jesus Christ like right in the center and did not really depict stories from the Bible as much as just to show like general spirituality and prayer and things like that. Okay, so read a little bit about this. This is a very small painting. This is about 32 inches by 24 inches, but there's a lot of detail in there. And if you even see in the back, there's a mirror hanging, and the whole scene reflects in the mirror like very, very tiny, as you can see here. So within the mirror, you see the reflection, and there are little drawings on the side that show Passion of Christ. So it shows the scene from Passion of the Christ. So Jesus Christ is still in there, but he's more of like as an atmosphere rather than actually showing like the person Jesus Christ. Okay, lots of symbolism. The skirt symbolizes pregnancy. Actually, she was not pregnant. She was hoping to be pregnant. This is kind of a fun fact. This was fashion in the day because the queen was pregnant. And so everybody wanted to look pregnant because that was their celebrity. But there's a lot of other things that I want you to read about in the book. Lots of symbols there. Okay. Late Renaissance and Mannerism. Very, very bad time. There was Charles V was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. He overthrew the king that came before. If you're interested in that sort of thing, I want you to look it up, but I'm not going to focus too much on it because we really have to focus on the artwork. There was not a lot of harmony going on. Also, this is towards the end of the split between Catholics and Protestants. So there's only a few people left that are really trying to make up their mind, but it's kind of the last straw. Most people have already made up their mind whether they want to be Protestant or Catholic. Okay. So late Renaissance art showed a lot of distortion. Mannerism, which means it has a little bit of more emotional effect. So I'm going to go back real quick and let's look at the faces here. No emotion. It looks very realistic overall, but there's really no emotion going on here. Okay? Even here, some of the faces, very sort of plain, very, very simple. There's not a lot of anger or happiness or this and that. So that's something that was created a little bit later on with mannerism. Okay, so this is an example of late Renaissance art. Artists creating like a really sort of jumbled. So this in the middle was supposed to be like the Last Supper, but he kind of zoomed out a little bit and showed all this other stuff that's going on as kind of like a hint to, hey, there's a lot of like stuff going on with the Catholic Church that's not really cool because they have really strong ties with the monarchy and they have too much money, and so they're taking advantage of people. So read a little bit about that. This is also from late Renaissance. It almost looks like Baroque, which I will talk about in a second. It's really different. This is also seen from the Last Supper. This is really, really cool because it looks so dramatic because of the angle, because of the lighting. There's so much contrast within the light part and the dark part, and there's so many more characters. It's showing like all these people serving Jesus Christ and the apostles, and all these spirits, and just very, very highly dramatic. And if you look at the size of this painting, 11 feet by 18 feet, it's huge. So it really made a big impact on people. Okay. Which leads me to after the Renaissance, it was the time period was called the Baroque from 1600s to about 1750. Again, a lot of exploration, a lot of time for scientific research. Finally, we have accepted that the sun was the center of the universe. There's a lot of discovery going on, etc., etc. Okay. Permanent split between Catholicism and Protestantism, so nobody's trying to attract anyone anymore. And artwork characteristics really start to change. A lot of emphasis on light, kind of like what we saw here. Very dramatic movements and theatrical compositions, etc. Okay, here's a very typical painting from the Baroque time period. This is by Peter Paul Rubens, one of the most important artists of this time period. Okay, again, using a lot of elements and principles of art, highlighting dark in the back, this kind of like dramatic angular line going on. If you can really see the emotion now, right, compared to the Renaissance time period, you can see the struggle in the bodies, and of course a lot of muscles going on. So it was learning a lot from the Greek time periods as well. If you remember looking at the Hellenistic time period, you'll start to see a lot of similarities there. Okay. It kind of leads, so things are starting to change. In the 1700s to 1900s, a lot of things happened. There was the American Revolution, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution. There's a lot of democratic governments that are replacing monarchies. And this period is known as the Age of Enlightenment because of that. So people had a little bit of more knowledge. There were people that were reading and writing more. So they were interested like in reason rather than just believing what the monarchy was saying. Okay? They were interested in equality and liberty. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about the Rococo time period. This happened kind of overlaps the Baroque time period a little bit, so 17th and 18th century. The monarchy was just, they were just taking a lot of advantage of people. They were so rich, and the general population was just so poor and really did not have much. But the Rococo, what it really means is like there's a lot of show in power and extravagance of the European ruling classes. Okay, so that's where this like amazing. I mean, it looks really beautiful, but think about it. If the monarchs have so much money to just gild everything in paintings and gold and mirrors and everything shiny. What do you think that the people had? They really didn't have that much left because the monarchy was just taking all the money. Okay. But the style, it's very whimsical, ornamental, organic shapes and lines, a lot of gold, white, and pastel colors. Really extravagant. Okay. So the Chateau de Versailles, this is just the entrance of the castle. Read a little bit more about it in your book, and Google it on YouTube. It's really interesting to see how large this palace complex is. I think it's the largest palace in the world. Towards the end of this time period, a lot of artists were really kind of interested in exposing what was so horrible about the monarchy. that they were just really kind of selling out. Okay, so this is a series of painting that William Hogarth did. It's a series of 6 paintings that I want you to read about, and this is called the Marriage Settlement, and it does not really look like a marriage if you think about it. The husband and wife, or the bride and groom, were really not interested in each other, but the actual paperwork is happening between the father of the bride and the father of the groom. So it's kind of like a business deal almost. Okay, so read a little bit about it. It's a series of 6 paintings and prints that were sent out to the general public to see. So these are like prints of the painting. This is the last one showing the lady's death. So this was the original bride. Now she's dying from syphilis. This is the child. The father of the woman is just taking the last bits of her, which is her ring. And, there's a lot of symbolism going on. So I want you to go back and forth between these paintings and try to see, okay, how has things changed, and how have the symbols changed? There's a lot of symbolism. Okay. Neoclassicism was an art movement that was all about like liberty and justice and democracy. Okay, this started to happen in America and in France to really show like that we've had enough of the monarchy. Now we want our own government. It's a little harking back to like Greek and Roman times. Greek times particularly because it was one of the first known democracies of the world, and so that's what people wanted. So this is a story from back in the Greek times. It's showing a lot of heroism. It's showing like, fighting for your country and being strong and having this sort of like Greek like strength symbolized by architecture in the back. Okay. This is kind of cool because it was also one of the original art movements that started in that, it didn't start in America, but America started to take part in it. This is when the American Revolution was happened. This is Thomas Jefferson's house. And I want you to think about what Roman architecture does this most resemble. Okay. Romanticism also happened at the same time as Neoclassicism. It kind of there's a lot of overlap because of the similar belief in liberty, equality, and things like that, but it was a little bit more emotional and dramatic. Okay? So this is a little bit more emotional and dramatic if you compare it to something like this, right? This is very stoic, fight for your country. This is, like our job to do sort of thing. And this one is a little bit more emotional. They want freedom. There's all kinds of people. This is a symbol, Lady Liberty, that is leading the French people to democracy. You have kids, you have older people, and there's a lot of death and a very emotional scenery going on in the back. Okay, so things happen, democracy started to form, but things were still not like really great. And so a lot of artists were interested in showing like real working class people and how they suffer. Okay. So this is an example of a realism artwork. So realism does not mean to make things look realistic. Okay. Realism means to show real people in the modern day, like everyday people. So that's kind of the difference. I want you to really keep that in mind. So again, realism is not really talking about like, oh, I'm going to make it look as realistic as possible, but it's more about like, okay, we're trying to depict like real people. Okay. Gustave Courbet, very important. This is a painting called Stone Breakers, and it looks really kind of normal to us today, but during that time, painting and sculpture was really only reserved for the elite and for the monarchy to show how important they are. So this was actually very controversial for that time period, to show like poor people or everyday people in a painting and giving them respect. Okay, the same thing was also happening in the United States. So Henry Ossawa Tanner is one of very important African American artists who went to France to learn how to paint, and when he came back to the United States, he wanted to depict his everyday and show people from his sort of like everyday life and show the real people in that everyday life, instead of just showing like elite and the most, you know, sophisticated or proper, or whatever you want to call it. Okay. I will end the lesson here, and I will create another video talking about the next sort of generation of artists.